We all love free things, which is why when someone's giving out free samples in a grocery store, I decide to keep coming back. But of course, life isn't fair, or free, as I learned when they kicked me out. So we found ways to get around paying for stuff. For physical stuff, it's shoplifting and robbery. And for digital stuff, or stuff that's more theoretical, like intellectual property, it's piracy. Piracy is the act of copying and or distributing paid digital goods, such as movies, TV shows, or the focus of this video, games. Of course, companies hate this. They would do anything in their power to make sure that no one could pirate their games. So, over the years, there have been countless attempts to put a halt on video game piracy. And while things have gotten less interesting over the years, there's still stuff being done. So let's take a look at some of the ways companies have decided to combat pirates in their video games. Ever since the dawn of video games, video game companies and developers have been trying to find out ways to make sure that their players are playing legitimately. And there have been various different methods to try and combat this issue. And here's just a few. Probably one of the easiest ways to make sure people have a legitimate copy of a game is to make the game come with something physical, or at least have something of importance come with the game. The simplest of something like that would be a code on the manual or box or something. The game Keep Talking and Nobody Explodes does this, with the player having to input the code at the front of the manual into the game to continue. But you can probably see how this can be easily averted. If you just look up the manual, you get the code. It's not really confidential. This might have been effective in the early days of gaming, but I highly doubt that. The 1988 game Gold Rush shows this off perfectly. There's an entire section of the manual dedicated to the history of the California Gold Rush, and at a certain point in the game, you'd be asked to recite a fact from the manual. Okay, so small correction, but everywhere I looked said that these facts were in the manual. But when I went looking, I couldn't find any evidence of these facts in the manual itself. So I went digging, and found out that copies of Gold Rush actually shipped with a book called California Gold, Story of the Rush to Riches by Lou and Phyllis Zahner. And in there you would find the facts, not the manual. It would give you the page and paragraph numbers as a hint, so it wasn't completely hard to find. But if you got it wrong, or mistyped, your character would, I shit you not, be hanged in the gallows. Now this isn't exclusive to piracy, this is also what happens if you get caught doing illegal stuff in the game. But my god, you probably wouldn't be able to get away with that today. Well, I guess it depends on the game. The next step up from codes would be with product keys. You'll know what a product key is if you've ever installed Windows or The Sims 3 in its various expansion packs. I know The Sims 3 one all too well. Anyways, with product keys, you get a key printed somewhere on the box or manual, and you would have to painstakingly type that into the installer to continue. For example, with The Sims 3, the product key is 20 characters long, separated into 5 4-character long segments. And they aren't words, they're just randomly placed. Sometimes you might be confused as to what they say. Then the code is fed into a mathematical algorithm, decoded, and then compared against a list of valid keys. This is very effective, although this isn't foolproof. There are keygens, which are programs that can generate legitimate keys with the click of a button, and cracks, which are altered versions of the program that remove the need of a product key altogether. Don't ask how I know about those. But this is boring. Where are the cooler things? Well, back in the early days of gaming, a few games decided to give you a code wheel. A code wheel can come in many forms, but it mainly is a wheel with another, smaller wheel placed atop the first with some holes cut out of it. On the bigger wheel, words, numbers, or other forms of codes would be placed so that when the smaller wheel was turned, the holes would align with said codes. Then the wheels would be decorated so that you could identify what code to pick. For example, the 1990 game The Secret of Monkey Island had a Dial a Pirate code wheel, in which the game would give you a face to make, and then you would be able to input one of the codes on the wheel. Very effective, although again not foolproof. In a similar way to manuals, you could photocopy each wheel separately, and then work from there what code to input. But we're definitely getting somewhere. And lastly, for physical things, lens lock. This was also during the era of 8-bit computing, and thus piracy was pretty easy and rampant. But some companies decided to include a lens lock, which was a row of prisms. When the game started up, it would give a messed up set of numbers or letters, and using the lens lock would put them back together. Pretty interesting, and yet it is so overcomplicated. While it was effective, it just wasn't easy to use and took up so much time. No one liked lens lock, other than the developers. With it being such a hard to use piece of software protection, it was only used on 11 games and faded into obscurity, and I think that's for the better. But of course, there's issues with all these methods. Mainly, the problem of losing the object needed. Once you lose the box or code wheel or lens lock, That's it. It's done. No more game for you, unless you get a cracked copy of the games, which in this instance is probably morally okay. You can no longer play that game until you find the object needed to start it up again. Well, either that or getting a photocopy manual, although that won't work for lens lock. But there's like no games that need lens lock anyway, so that's the early era of video games, when you actually went to a store and bought a game in a box. But what about the modern day? The modern day is boring. Gaming has advanced further into the digital age, and with it comes a death to anti-piracy as we knew it. Nowadays, we mostly get our content from digital stores, Steam, Epic Games, or the proprietary stores on actual consoles. And that means that you're most likely paying for this stuff. And that also means that you probably have an internet connection to buy and furthermore download those games, which means that it can be verified. This is all a part of video game DRM. For example, Steam games will check when you open a game if it's legit. If it is, it then unwraps the exe file and then plays the game for you. If you have Steam, you can prove this by looking at the location of the game's icon. Instead of it being a location on your computer, it's instead a link to Steam. Now, of course, the exe files do exist on your computer, but opening them from there might result in issues. Although there are plenty of other tactics here, like forcing a web server to check if your game is legit during gameplay, but again, that's boring. Modern day stuff is boring. That's half why I'm calling it a lost art, because it's just not interesting anymore. But what is interesting are the ways that developers might convince pirates to buy the game. And it isn't just locking them out. Just locking out pirates doesn't really work all the time. The locking mechanism can be removed or worked around, and then there's nothing you can do. But a fun, and maybe even effective method of combating pirates is to play the long con. Make the game seem normal with nothing wrong happening until a certain point. And when that point hits, all of a sudden, the game freaks the fuck out. It does something completely out of the ordinary, and now the game is unbearably hard. These are the anti-piracy measures that are insanely interesting. They're so unique and fun and give the game a little bit more character. So let's take a look at some of the most notable. Game Dev Tycoon, or Indie Game Developer Simulator, is a game where you play the role of a wannabe Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, making games out of your garage hoping to make it big one day. But if the game detects a pirated copy, the game will let you know by having pirates pirate your game. And all of a sudden, you're losing money, and now your company is bankrupt. But who would want to pirate my games? I'm the creator. You should be supporting the developer. Wait a minute. And how would the game detect a pirated copy? Well, standard Steam stuff, but also because there was an alternate version released for pirates. Yeah, the head of Greenheart Games, Patrick Klug, purposefully released this version onto torrenting sites to piss off pirates. And it worked. Many people who had pirated the game complained about it, living blissfully unaware that it was because they were like the fake, artificial people in the game that they were complaining about. I can't progress further. I reach some point where if I make a decent game, it gets pirates and I can't make any profit. I could easily make 1 million sales with a 9 to 10 game, but now it's not possible due to the piracy. Is there some way to avoid that? Can I research a DRM or something? Why are there so many people that pirate? I had like 5 million, and then people suddenly started pirating everything I made. Not fair. Is there any way to keep it from happening? Oh, the irony. And fun fact, apparently one singular day after the game's release, 93.6% of players had pirated the game. 93.6. 3,100 players were not playing an $8 game from a startup company, and then were, in a roundabout way, publicly complaining about themselves, and also humiliating themselves. You can't just make that up. GTA 4, or New York City Simulator, is a game that I'm sure you're all aware of. Do missions, do fighting, do women, it's all there. It's like if you made the phrase, "fuck bitches, get money" into a game. Can you tell I've never played GTA? But even after crackers removed some of the anti-piracy code, some still lurked around, and pirates were met with a slew of things that made the game near impossible to play. Firstly, after a few minutes of playtime, the camera will begin to wobble and shake, like if you're drunk. This is a standard feature of the game, but if the game detects that it's pirated, it'll be on non-stop. And there is a non-zero chance that there's some pirate out there who got motion sickness and threw up. Secondly, all engines in the game that you interact with will have their health decreased, meaning that you're not going to be driving anywhere for too long. Even taxis will have this issue, so you can't cheat the system like that. Also, there's auto acceleration, meaning that every vehicle effectively has a brick on the pedal, meaning that you're always going forward at the top speed. Have fun doing literally any mission that needs a car. And lastly, some missions are just flat out impossible to complete. Because fuck you. One example of this is the mission Clean Getaway, in which you need to deliver a car to Vlad. But when arriving to the location, the garage you're meant to deliver the car into just doesn't open. And if you get out of the car, it locks itself. You can't complete the mission at all, which, personally, is a skill issue. Spyro Year of the Dragon, or Fictional Reptile Simulator, is a platform game released for the PS1 in 2000, in which you follow the titular Spyro around forgotten worlds and collect eggs. Much like GTA 4, there's plenty of stuff that Spyro does to mess with pirates in crazy ways. Partway through the game, Zoe, who is meant to be a helper to Spyro, will tell you that the game is pirated. And then the fun begins. The game basically begins to do anything and everything in its power to make your life a living hell. Some of the things you can expect to happen to you while playing the pirated version of the game are: the ability to pause will be removed. In PAL copies, the language of the game will change at random. Some enemies will not give gems, and gems on the ground will be removed. Eggs will just randomly become uncollected. Going from location to location is random instead of it being where you want it to go, and a whole lot more. But even with these issues, the game is seemingly playable. But it's still impossible to beat, as if you get to the final boss fight, the game crashes and deletes your save file. The game cannot be beat, but it's very unlikely that you would even get to that point. YouTuber Proto tried to do a 100% playthrough of a pirated version of Spyro, and spent 8 hours trying before eventually giving up. And I have to give credit where credit is due, they've got determination. I can barely spend 8 hours existing in real life, and they tortured themselves trying to play a pirated copy of a PS1 game. Now, the anti-piracy of Spyro 3 is actually really interesting, as this is a PS1 game, and mod shipping the system allows you to use standard CDs and bypass the anti-piracy features of the PS1. But even if pirates deleted some of the main bulk of the anti-piracy code, there was still some lurking within. The devs of Spyro 3 actually hid checksum code within the normal code of the game, making it near impossible to detect, and thus, this anti-piracy measure was born. So the long con is a very effective and fun way to get back at pirates, but these are all very real, and real-life pirates have seen these screens while trying to circumvent paying for a game. But this can't be a gaming anti-piracy video without talking about the tumor on YouTube that is the fake anti-piracy screens.
So long, Bowser!
Tracking down an original fake anti-piracy screen is hard, but some of the more popular and notable ones were for Mario Party DS and Super Mario 64. Uploaded in October 2020, YouTuber Joey Perleone uploaded Mario Party DS anti-piracy screen, in which he shows off a supposed anti-piracy screen for Mario Party DS. And it's weirdly creepy. On the top screen, we see the text, "Piracy is no party. It is a serious crime to pirate video games. Please power off the system and report this stolen software immediately. For more information, please visit," and then Nintendo's anti-piracy site. And on the bottom, we see the cast of Mario Party behind bars with the text, "Power off now," flashing over top them. And in the background is this really eerie track that sounds way too scary to be in a Nintendo game. It's giving Sonic CD Fun is Infinite vibes, you know? And then, for Mario 64, we had to go to the Super Mario 64 Beta Archive. May it rest in peace. Of course, the SM64 Beta Archive was an ARG, but this was during the era of the "every copy of Mario 64 is personalized" meme, and this video got people's attention, and is still the channel's most popular video, amassing over 2 million views. Anyway, the video was released a few months earlier in June 2020, and shows a standard Mario 64 startup. But then we get a few sound effects, and then a screen of Mario sitting atop the N64 logo, looking confused, with a cartridge in his hand. The text above reads, "It is a serious crime to copy video games according to copyright law. Please refer to your Nintendo game instruction booklet for further information." Again, it's very eerie, but that's more because of the ambience of the video, really. Now, these two are nothing special, but I believe they set the precedent for future fake anti-piracy screens. Most all other anti-piracy screens take heavy inspiration from these two, as well as real screens, especially the messages aimed directly towards the user. For example, in a lot of Nintendo-related ones, it's not uncommon to see them quite literally up and say that you're a pirate, and you're a piece of shit, and we're calling the authorities on you. Fuckhead. So let's take a look at some of the more memorable ones, at least to me. First up is an Animal Crossing New Horizons screen by Creme Fish. At the start of the game, Timmy and Tommy would see that you're a criminal after you make your character, and deny to give you a ticket to the island, to which you get your standard piracy bad message. It kinda has a creepy factor with the glitchy audio, but I genuinely like how this one played out. It plays into the vibe of ACNH and even tells you that your application for the getaway package was denied. I genuinely would believe that this is how Nintendo would have handled this if I didn't think too hard about it. Another was a Super Mario 3D All-Star screen by Major Stu. After you try to play one of the 3 games, the screen will flash with a video from the SM64 beta archive, and then take you back to the title screen, with all the games crossed out, and the text on the side telling you to turn off the console and report the software immediately. And that's all well and good for a fake anti-piracy screen, but there's more. If you refuse to power off the system, the console literally calls the cops. Yep, it'll tell you to connect a headset in and use the console in handheld mode, and then we'll call the cops and make you say your name, address, and that you own illegal Nintendo software and that you want to be arrested. Which is absolutely wild, and not just because Nintendo put in a working phone system to the Switch before an internet browser app. But I don't consider any of these to be a part of the tumor of anti-piracy screens. They're just scary for the fact that they're anti-piracy screens. No, the real tumor are the screens that purposely try to scare the user. The format is simple. Normal gameplay, game detects that it's an illegal copy, jump scare, please no pirate message. Oh, and don't forget the VHS overlay, because every screen ever needs to look like it's a 90s TV show being recorded onto a tape. It's just so boring, and once you've seen one, you've seen them all. And there's absolutely no realism to them, which just makes them more boring for me. Like, there is no way in hell that Nintendo would put this image of a scary, f***ed up looking Pikachu as the background for an anti-piracy screen. And also, let's leave an honorable mention for kill screen videos. Kill screen videos are similar to anti-piracy screens, except they focus mainly on consoles and are for when they malfunction rather than for games and piracy. They follow a similar path of events. Boot up console says it's malfunctioning and to turn it off, turn console off, rinse and repeat a few times, console tells you to die or something. All with a VHS overlay because we have to have the analog horror aesthetic, but I'm already stealing enough content with this video, so I'll leave that there. Anti-piracy just isn't what it used to be. No longer do we have the funky physical things to prove that we have the games we bought. Instead, we have games that require internet even for offline play. But overall, anti-piracy has gotten better, but less interesting over the years. Even still, the screens inflict horror among those who have had the misfortune of seeing one while trying to play a game that their parents got on the cheap. And thus, this introduces people amping up the horror aspect tenfold, along with the rise of analog horror on YouTube. But behind the horror, behind the illegality, part of this is very interesting and fun to look in on. Seeing how developers wanted to fuck with pirates and let them know that we know what you're doing is very funny. But I think as a good conclusion and a good moral to the story, don't pirate. Or else you'll end up like me.